My name's James Carter, 24 years old back in 2010, working on a factory production floor in Birmingham, England, to support myself through part-time college courses. It was a gritty job, but it paid the bills, and I'd just started a long-distance relationship with a girl who made everything brighter. My boss, Richard, was a controlling, cheating jerk who thrived on messing with people's lives. When he tried to sleep with my girlfriend Sarah and got her fired for saying no, I was livid. He thought he could ruin us and walk away. I waited, planned, and struck back, stealing his dirty secrets and sending them to his wife. His marriage collapsed, he lost everything, and I got my justice. This is how I served revenge, cold and precise. It all kicked off in late 2009. I'd landed the factory job after months of scraping by, assembling machine parts for industrial clients. The work was repetitive, long hours, loud machinery, but the pay was steady, and I needed it for college. The production floor was a mix of grizzled veterans and younger guys like me, all under Richard's thumb. He was a type A tyrant, mid-40s, always barking orders and smirking like he owned us. He was married to Ellen, a quiet woman in the company's accounting department, but fidelity wasn't his thing. Richard had a sick hobby, photography. Not landscapes or portraits, nude photos of himself with women he slept with, which he'd show off to the guys on the floor, bragging about his conquests. It was disgusting, but he was the boss, so most just nodded and looked away. I kept my head down, focusing on my work and my new relationship with Sarah. Sarah worked at another branch of the company, a sales office 100 miles away in Manchester. We met at a company training event, hit it off, and started dating, texting and calling to bridge the distance. She was smart, funny, and made my long shifts bearable. I'd visit her on weekends, dreaming of a future together. But Richard had a knack for sniffing out anything personal. One day, he overheard me on a break, talking to a coworker about Sarah. His eyes lit up, that predatory grin spreading. "Long distance, huh? That's tough, James," he said, clapping my shoulder. I shrugged it off, but I should have known he'd make it his business. Richard's control-freak nature thrived on chaos. He'd pit workers against each other, dock pay for minor infractions, or joke about firing someone to see them squirm. His affairs were an open secret on the floor, but Ellen seemed oblivious, and he kept his photos locked away to avoid her finding them. I tried to stay invisible, clocking in, doing my job, and clocking out. But when Richard learned about Sarah, he saw a new game. On his next trip to the Manchester office, he cornered her, all charm and sleaze, inviting her to dinner with a clear agenda. Sarah shut him down, politely but firmly. Richard didn't take rejection well. Within a week, she was fired, accused of poor performance, based on lies he fed her manager. Sarah called me, devastated, crying as she packed her desk. "He made it up, James. I said no, and now I'm out." I was furious, my blood boiling. Sarah was jobless, her confidence shattered, all because Richard couldn't handle being turned down. I wanted to storm his office, punch his smug face, but I knew that'd only get me fired too. Instead, I played it cool, bottling my rage and watching for an opening. Richard kept those photos in his office, his trophy collection, too risky to store at home where Ellen might see. If I could get my hands on them, I could hit him where it hurt. But his office was locked, and he was careful. I needed patience, a plan, and a stroke of luck. For months, I waited, keeping my performance flawless, to avoid giving Richard an excuse to target me. Sarah found a new job, but the sting of her firing lingered. We leaned on each other, our bond growing stronger. I'd see Richard strutting around, flashing his photos to the floor guys, laughing like he was untouchable. "This one's a firecracker," he'd say, waving a Polaroid. It made my skin crawl, but it fueled my resolve. I started noting his habits. When he left for trips, who cleaned his office, how security worked on weekends. The factory ran overtime shifts on Saturdays, and I volunteered for every one, knowing the cleaning crew came through then. Richard's office was usually locked, but the cleaners had keys, and they weren't always vigilant. My chance came in early 2011, a rainy Saturday when I was pulling overtime. The production floor was half empty, just a skeleton crew. Around noon, the cleaning lady, Maria, rolled through with her cart. I'd chatted with her before, built a bit of rapport. She unlocked Richard's office to vacuum and dust. I saw my shot. "Hey Maria," I said, holding some blueprints. "Mind if I check some measurements in there?" Richard asked for specs. She shrugged. "Sure, just lock up when you're done." She headed to the accounting wing, leaving the door ajar. My heart raced. I slipped inside, shutting the door behind me. Richard's office was a mess of files and coffee mugs, his desk cluttered with papers. I didn't have long. I yanked open the drawers, rifling through pens, notepads, and random junk. In the back of the bottom drawer, under a stack of invoices, I hit pay dirt. A pile of photos, 4 inches thick, hundreds of Polaroids. I flipped through a few, Richard grinning in compromising positions with women, his face clear as day. I didn't have time to sort them, so I grabbed the entire stack, stuffed them into my backpack, and rearranged the drawer to cover my tracks. I locked the door, returned to my station, and worked the rest of my shift, my pulse hammering. I'd just stolen the key to his downfall. I waited for the perfect moment. Richard announced a week-long trip to another branch, leaving Monday. That gave me time to plan. On Tuesday, during my lunch break, I drove to a post office in Richard's hometown, 20 miles away, far from the factory. I'd sorted the photos at home, picking 12 of the most damning. Richard with 4 different women, all dark-haired or redheads, none his blonde wife, Ellen. Each showed his face, unmistakable. I bought a plain envelope, addressed it to Ellen, at their home, and mailed it with no return address. My hand shook as I dropped it in the slot, but I felt a rush of triumph. The fuse was lit. Back at work, I acted normal, bracing for the fallout. Richard returned Friday, oblivious. Monday morning, the factory buzzed with whispers. Ellen had filed for divorce. Word spread fast. She'd received evidence of his cheating, and her lawyer was going for blood. Richard's smug demeanor cracked. He looked haggard, snapping at everyone. By Wednesday, co-workers were gossiping openly. Ellen's lawyer had cleaned him out. House, savings, half his assets. Richard was living in a rented flat, his marriage and reputation in tatters. He never suspected me. The photos were gone, and I'd covered my tracks. No one saw me in his office, and the postmark was untraceable. Sarah and I watched from afar, relieved but cautious. She'd rebuilt her life, and we were stronger than ever. Richard's downfall didn't bring her job back, but it felt like justice. He stayed on as boss, but his authority was shot. The floor guys stopped laughing at his crude jokes, and Ellen's absence in accounting was a constant reminder. He was a shell of his former self, barking orders to hide his shame. I worked there another year, saving for college, then left for a better job. Sarah and I got married in 2013, building a life free of his shadow. Looking back, I don't regret a thing. Richard thought he could control us, ruin Sarah's career for rejecting him, and keep his dirty secret safe. I played the long game, using his own arrogance against him. Stealing those photos was a risk, but mailing them to Ellen was checkmate. I can still picture his face that last week, pale and broken, as the factory whispered about his divorce. It was worth every second of waiting. Now as I sit with Sarah, our kids playing nearby, I think of that envelope hitting Ellen's mailbox. Thanks, Richard. You taught me how to hit where it hurts.